not to miss a mistake. Born too soon or too late. I'm not to miss a mistake. Born too soon or too late.
Well, welcome and good evening to my legacy makers and my curse breakers. I'm so glad to be with you tonight as we continue in our journey of the discovery of humanity. You know, this is an interesting time and just a wonderful time to just get deeper into the Bible to get a greater context of what God is doing and saying even to his people during this season. And I'm glad to be able to take you on this journey as we explore humanity and its original roots. And so tonight we're going to dive right into our lesson, and we're praying God's blessings upon it. And listen, do me a favor, like and share so that we can get other people to come and grasp some of this knowledge that I know that will be a blessing to them. And so we are starting tonight on our week 2. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Afro-Asiatic world and just looking at the Bible's original context. So many times we don't get that. And so we want to just explore that. Last week we began at the beginning. I took you right into Genesis, and we established what I like to say 2 foundational truths. And what were those truths? We said, number one, we are all made in the image of God. And I want to emphasize all. When we think of creation and we think of humanity, not culture, not race, not color, not skin tone, not hair texture, all of us are made in the image of God. And secondly, we all come from one blood. But tonight, we want to take it to the next step because once you understand who humanity is, then you must begin to understand where humanity unfolds. And that means we must begin to understand the world of the Bible. And, you know, I don't think many people really understand the world of the Bible except from in the context for which they are living and existing. But if you read the Bible through the wrong lens, you may read truth ultimately, but you miss context. And when you miss context, what happens is you begin to misunderstand the story. So tonight we're going to step into that Asiatic world, that Afro-Asiatic world, and begin to go just a little deeper so that you get an understanding. And, you know, I haven't been going major pieces, but going bits and pieces because I want us to grasp this and get it in our spirits. All right. Our scripture text comes from Genesis. It says, now a river went out to Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. And those 4 rivers, we're going to look at some of that tonight. And then in Acts 17:26, it says, and he made from one blood every nation of mankind or humanity to dwell on the face of the earth. So I know I didn't read the whole scripture, but these are our foundational scriptures that we're using, and I put them up for your ability to copy them, screenshot them, to use them in whatever way you see fit. Now, I want you to understand as we transition into our lesson tonight, the Bible is not mythology. The Bible is not philosophy. The Bible literally begins, and it's an important caveat that you have to understand, the Bible begins in geography. It is rooted in real people, real geographical locations, real civilizations. And if we're going to understand the story and the history of the Bible, we have to understand the setting. So my first thought tonight is God's story happens in a real world. It's not some pseudo place in the ethereal or some place out in the realm of no man's land. No, but the Bible begins in geography. And Genesis names these rivers. And that's why I didn't read the names, because those are the biblical names, but they now have modern day names. But these names are the Tigris and the Euphrates. Now, understand this, these are not symbolic ideas. These are real locations and that means that the biblical story is unfolding in a real historical environment. So it's not something that's coming down out of the clouds. It's not something that is a figment of imagination, but there are real historical, geographical context that we can see today that brings this together. Now, here's the $1,000,000 question. Where is the environment? Well, here's where I want us to ponder tonight. The ancient Near East, or the regions that are connecting, are, and I'm going to put a map up so you can see the regions that are connecting, talking about Northeast Africa, Egypt, Canaan, Mesopotamia, Arabia. And I think it's important that you recognize this. And I'm giving you this map so that you can see this is where history and geography points us to where Eden was located. And so in Eden, we see that this is the place where the rivers came together, the Mesopotamia. This is a part of Egypt. Now, I put this up because I want you to see historically where humanity began. Now, here's an important concept that I want you to capture tonight. God chose a real place in history to reveal eternal truth. It wasn't something in the clouds. No, there was a real place in history that God chose. Now, sometimes we read scripture spiritually without reading it geographically. But geography literally really matters, because geography gives us context. It gives us a basis for where all of this happens and all of this occurred and where it started. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. What does that terminology Afro-Asiatic mean? Well, Bishop, what does that literally mean? So I want to define it for you tonight. And as we define it, I want to show you the next map that I got here so that you can understand and you can see it. What does Afro-Asiatic really mean? Well, the Afro-Asiatic world refers broadly to the interconnected regions of Africa and Asia and the Near East. Now, I need you to see that, because this includes Egypt, Ethiopia, or as we would know it as biblical terminology, Cush, Canaan, Israel, and Mesopotamia. Now, these regions, they are not isolated, but what I do want you to recognize is this area here. You see how that dotted line there, this area represents the cradle of human civilization. Again, one human family, one connected world, one region, many people that are moving throughout history. So they were connected how? They were connected through migration. They were connected through trade. They were connected through language. They were connected through family lines. All of that connectivity is happening right there. So this means that the biblical world was not culturally narrow, but it was interconnected. And I think that's an important concept. You got to know that this is where it all started. It didn't start. I'm going to put it back up again because I'm excited about that map. It all started here. Didn't start in the United States of America. It didn't start in Canada or South America. No, the cradle of humanity began right here. And from the beginning, I want you to understand, God movement was happening in a broad human story. It wasn't just isolated to one group of people, but God's humanity was moving throughout that. Now, here is the thought that I want to give you on that. The Bible unfolds in a connected world, not a disconnected one. And that's important to understand because you see in the world today, there's a lot of disunity, of disconnection, and trying to say this group is better than that group, and this group is worse than that group, and these people are better than those people. And when we understand biblically the history of creation, we understand that we are all one human family, and God did not start Christianity in the USA. He didn't start it. This is the important reason of understanding biblical context. It was started right there in that Afro-Asiatic community, Africans, Asians, all of those people coming together was the cradle of humanity. Now, my third point tonight is simply this: Africa's proximity to early biblical history. I want to be clear and I want to be balanced. Scripture does not promote racial superiority. Let me just reemphasize that. It does not promote racial superiority. And we have seen where particular groups of people or races think that they have the upper hand on spirituality, on Christendom, on God, on a relationship with God, and who does God like best. No, but it does not promote racial superiority. The scripture does place many biblical events, though, in close geographic relationship to Africa. And that's important to understand. A lot of people don't acknowledge that. And sometimes in the Bible, in our teaching, it's kind of even been whitewashed over. It's been just kind of pushed to the backside. But it's important to understand that Egypt appears all throughout Scripture. Cush appears all throughout Scripture. Ethiopia appears all throughout Scripture. And that really matters. Why? Because the Bible reminds us that Africa is not absent from the biblical narrative, but it's very present, and not only present, but it's center and present. So to be able to, well, let me go back to my point here. To be able to understand, to acknowledge presence is not to distort Scripture, but it's to read Scripture honestly. Now, I hope you're catching this because it's important to see that we are not saying that one part of the nation is better than another, but we are looking at context and where it really all started. And that's why it's important to understand context matters. And that's going to be my next point. So this is not about replacing one distorted view with another view, but this is about clarity. So when I emphasize that biblical history and heritage comes from an Afro-Asiatic world, I want you to understand I'm not trying to elevate one over another. I'm just giving facts of where it all started. And that brings me to my next point is why context matters. Why does context really matter? What's so important about that? Well, if we read the Bible only through modern assumptions, here's what you want to capture. If we read it only through modern assumptions, we unconsciously westernize it. When you grow up, you become a product of your environment, and you think that you are the center of the world and that everything emanates and originates with you. That's just human nature. So if we read the Bible just through our modern assumptions and perceptions, we can westernize it, we can oversimplify it, or we can disconnect it from its historical settings. And this is where I want us to be cautious, because when we understand context, we see things differently when we begin to understand. Because remember that we looked at the migration, we looked at civilization, we looked at diversity, we looked at geography, and guess what? It didn't happen here first in the USA or in Western culture. Let me not just use USA, but didn't just happen in Western culture. No, it existed prior to. So when we read it and we understand it, we can read it differently. And then what happens? Suddenly, the Bible begins to open up and we begin to get these great aha moments or these moments of revelation. And we begin to say, oh my goodness, I really didn't recognize or didn't know that the Bible was inclusive in that format or in that particular realm. And so, yes, it's inclusive. The cradle of civilization was right here. So, um, my next point is simply this: uh, context does not weaken the faith, but it deepens the faith. So, context does not weaken the faith, but it deepens it. And so, why does that matter? Why does that matter to us today? Well, understanding the Afro-Asiatic world helps us to do what? Three things. It helps us to read scripture more accurately. It helps us to appreciate God's global movement, and it breaks down narrow assumptions, and we don't become isolationist. We don't think that it's me, and me, myself, and nobody else. We don't think that it's God bless me and nobody else. We don't think that it's we are the center of culture. We are the center of creation. We are the center of God's movement. No, no. It helps us to understand before we were, God was, and he had a geographical place that we call the cradle of humanity. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us, and I want you to catch this point, it reminds us that God has always been moving through humanity on a scale bigger than culture alone. God has been moving throughout humanity, expanding humanity greater than culture alone. So, there are three things that I want us to take away from this lesson tonight, and I want us to understand. Three things. Number one, and here's the context: the Bible happens in real geography. It happens in a real geographical location. And I don't want you to miss that. It's important to recognize that. Number two, Africa and the Near East are deeply connected in the biblical context. You got to recognize they're deeply connected in a biblical context. And then so you saw the map, the bigger picture. And then understanding that context strengthens our revelation. And so that's what I wanted to cover tonight. And as I said, I'm not going too deep, too quickly. I'm setting foundation. I'm setting context for us. But I want you to just ask yourself these questions. Have we been reading scripture with context, or have we been reading without context? And I want you to really ponder, has your view of the Bible been too narrow? Has it been overly westernized and you just see it from one perspective? And then how does geography now deepen your understanding of God's story? So next week, we're going to move from geography to generations, and we're going to begin to talk about some critical areas and some critical people. We're going to start introducing these critical people into our study. We're going to look at Cush and Nimrod and the table of nations as that applies. But once you understand this critical piece that the world, once you begin to understand the world, you begin to understand the people. And we're going to start incorporating the people into the picture next week so that you can you can grasp that meaning. So Our discovery of humanity, the cradle of an Afro-Asiatic world that has impacted and turned the world upside down. When we understand that, we begin to read with a different revelation and a different insight. Well, my time is up. I trust that you enjoyed the Bible study tonight, and we'll be back. And again, we're going to move from geography to generations. On behalf of Dr. Nat and Dr. Leslie and Pastor Caleb, I want you to know we love you. We appreciate you. We're praying for you. And look, we're looking forward to seeing you this Sunday, whether it's online or in person. Join us for a phenomenal service. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week. Bye.